I believe in my heart that our success is 100% dependent on our execution. We have the resources, we have the brand, we have the people, and we have the capabilities.
Get ready for exciting news on SoFi. What if I told you that SoFi isn't just a retail trader favorite, but a stock quietly dominated by Vanguard, BlackRock, Jane Street, D.E. Shaw, JPMorgan, and over 1,200 institutions? And here's the wild part. By the end of this video, you'll know whether you're investing with Wall Street or directly against them. In this video, we're going to break down who really owns SoFi, what changed as of today's trading session, and how that impacts volatility, S&P 500 inclusion, and your long-term thesis. Stay with me till the end, because I'll show you the one insider move that looks scary in headlines, but actually isn't the dump people think it is. Let's get into it. Quick, today's tape update. Before we talk big owners, let's talk about what just happened today. SoFi closed today around $27.04 per share, down about 2.8% on the day. Intraday, it traded between roughly $26.5 and $28.5, with about 75 million shares changing hands. So yeah, a red day with heavy but normal SoFi volume. But here's the twist. Even on a red day, the ownership story underneath the chart actually got stronger. We'll come back to that when we talk about the 1,238 institutions that now own SoFi. Why who owns SoFi matters. SoFi has become one of the most talked about fintech stocks on the market. But behind the daily candles, options flow, and social media hype, there's a bigger question. Who actually controls this company? Because ownership structure affects how volatile the stock can be, how much index money can be forced to buy, and how seriously Wall Street treats SoFi as a long-term financial institution. If you only remember one thing from this video, remember this. The chart shows you the price. The owners tell you the direction of the story. So let's zoom out and look at the ownership map. Ownership snapshot. Institutions versus retail versus insiders. Right now, SoFi's ownership roughly breaks down like this. Institutions, about 53–54% of the company, around 670 million shares. Insiders, execs and directors, about 1.7% or to 21 million shares. General public divided by retail, roughly 44% or about 535 million shares. And the top 25 shareholders together control close to 40% of SoFi. In a minute, we'll zoom into names like Vanguard and BlackRock, but first I want you to lock this in. You are not in a meme stock anymore. You're sharing the cap table with some of the biggest players in global finance. Fresh institutional update. 1,238 owners and rising. Here's the fresh data that just dropped. SoFi is now held by around 1,238 institutional investors, up about plus 206 funds in a single quarter. Total institutional shares reported are about 669.5 million, up roughly 9.5% quarter over quarter. The average portfolio weight in SoFi across these funds is about 0.24%, up over 11% versus last quarter. What does this translate to? More funds are owning more SoFi, and they're giving it a slightly bigger slice of their portfolios. At the micro level, some funds like AllianceBernstein and Ameriprise did trim recently, but on net, both the number of owners and the total shares they hold are up, not down. And when we later talk about S&P 500 inclusion, these numbers matter a lot more than one red day on the chart. The big three: Vanguard, BlackRock, JPMorgan. Now let's talk big names. One id, the Vanguard Group, the king of SoFi, around 107 million shares, roughly 8.89% of the company, about $3 billion at recent prices. Vanguard is mostly index and ETF money, So here's a mental picture. Every time SoFi climbs the ladder into bigger indices, Vanguard's position can grow automatically without a single analyst saying, "We like SoFi now." BlackRock, giant #2, about 62 million shares, roughly 5% plus ownership, around 1.7 billion in value. Between Vanguard and BlackRock, more than 14% of SoFi is effectively locked up in the hands of two passive giants. If you thought it was retail versus Wall Street, in SoFi's case, it's more like retail plus Wall Street versus whoever is still short. JPMorgan Asset Management, Wall Street's active vote. New filings show JPMorgan now around 47 million shares, about 3.9% of the company, roughly $1 billion plus in SoFi stock. So while JPMorgan competes with SoFi in banking, their asset management arm is a $1 billion shareholder. Remember this line for later. Legacy banks aren't just fighting SoFi. Some of them are secretly funding its rise. The quants and traders. Jane Street, D.E. Shaw, 2 Sigma. Jane Street Group, the liquidity engine. Roughly 31 million shares, around 2.5% of SoFi, hundreds of millions in exposure. Jane Street is huge in ETFs and options. Their stake says SoFi is deeply wired into modern market plumbing. D.E. Shaw, algorithmic powerhouse, about 35 million shares, around 2.9% ownership, a near $1 billion quant bet. 2 Sigma, twin positions. Between 2 Sigma Investments and 2 Sigma Advisors, over 22 million shares combined, nearly 2% of the company. Coming up in a moment, we'll talk about how this ties into SoFi's options flow today, including a bearish put sweep that isn't as scary as it sounds. For now, just note, SoFi is on the radar of the top quant firms on the planet. The index engine, Geode, State Street, UBS, Geode Capital, Fidelity Index Engine, to 1.8%. State Street Global Advisors, to 1.5%. UBS Asset Management. These are the index and asset allocation machines. This is where the S&P 500 story starts to sneak in. When a stock gets into a major index, these players can't argue about it. They just have to buy more. Big banks that compete and own SoFi. Legacy banks, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley. SoFi is trying to disrupt them on products and pricing, but their investment arms are saying, "We're going to own a slice of this disruption." So now you've got a fintech challenger, funded in part by the very banks it's trying to challenge. That's not a meme story, that's a structural story. Volaridge, dimensional, and factor funds. Volaridge Investment Management. These are factor-driven firms. Quality, profitability, momentum, value. If you've ever wondered, do the quants think SoFi is junk or quality? The answer is right here. Factor funds are increasingly comfortable holding it. Anthony Noto and insider skin in the game. Now, what about insiders, especially CEO Anthony Noto? Roughly 11.35 million shares, just under 1% of the company, over 300 million at current prices. All insiders together hold about 21 million shares, roughly 1.7% of SoFi. So when Noto talks about SoFi's future, he's not giving a TED Talk, he's talking with nearly $1/3 of $1 billion of his own net worth on the line. CFO's recent structured trade, the scary headline explained. Here's that insider move I teased at the start. CFO Christopher Lapointe recently entered a prepaid variable forward contract on 500,000 shares dump. This is more like, I'm going to lock in some cash today, hedge some risk, but I'm still aligned with the upside, and I keep my vote. This is the kind of nuance you don't get from a tweet screenshot of a Form 4. Retail still owns tilde, 44%. Even with all that institutional muscle, retail investors still own roughly 44% of SoFi. That's almost half the company. It's why options flow can move the name hard. Social sentiment still matters. And SoFi can have institutional depth and those explosive retail days. Quick check-in. If you're still watching, type 44% in the comments, so I know you're part of that retail block paying attention to who sits on the other side of your trades. Options. Flow and sentiment. Today's angle. On the derivative side, current put divided by call ratio on SoFi is around 0.66, still net bullish overall. Today, scanners picked up a bearish May 2026 $26 put sweep, about 62 contracts, roughly $29,000 in premium. That sounds dramatic in a headline, but in context, it's likely a hedge from someone already long stock or calls. So even on today's red day, the overall options picture still leans constructively bullish. Street View, updated price targets. Analysts are also adjusting. The average 12-month price target has been lifted about 17%, from roughly $23.5 to about $27.5. The low target is still in the $12.13 range. The high target sits just under $40. So the street is basically saying, we underestimated this. Now we're willing to put the average target where the stock trades and still leave room for a move into the high minus $30 seconds if the bull case plays out. What this ownership structure means for you. 1. SoFi is now fully on Wall Street's radar. Over half the company is in institutional hands, and that slice is growing. 2. It's S&P 500 friendly. Market cap, profitability, liquidity, and now ownership profile all look like a future S&P 500 candidate. 3. Volatility in the short term, gravity in the long term. Retail and options can still whip the price, but the long-term gravity is being set by Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, Geode, and the Quant giants. 4. Insiders are hedging, not bailing. Noto still has a huge stake. The CFO's move looks like risk management, not a disappearing act. And in a future episode, we can layer this ownership picture on top of SoFi's earnings trajectory and S&P 500 timeline, so make sure you're subscribed if you want that. Vanguard and BlackRock together control billions of dollars of SoFi. JPMorgan, Jane Street, D.E. Shaw, 2 Sigma, Geode, UBS, State Street, BofA, Morgan Stanley are all meaningful owners. Over 1,200 institutions now hold around 670 million shares, and that number is rising. Anthony Noto still has over 11 million shares in the game. Retail investors like you still own about 44% of the company. SoFi is no longer just a trade. It's becoming a fully institutionalized fintech story that still has massive retail participation. If you found this breakdown helpful, smash that like button and drop the word ownership in the comments so I know you made it to the end. Hit subscribe if you want more SoFi deep dives, S&P 500 watch updates, and institutional flow breakdowns.
So thank you all for being here today.